Didn't know our worship service came with free entertainment, did you? But Jesus did say, "Suffer little children to come unto me, for of such is the kingdom of heaven." So we're not going to kick them out. Talking about God's chosen people this morning, the Israelites, it's possible we may get through this lesson this morning. Dennis is going to teach for me Thursday night, because Ruth and I are going to be out of town, but we'll just see how far we get. But if we finish this, he can just pick out whatever you feel is needful. But we may not. You know how long-winded I can be. There is a lot of repetition, though, in this lesson from the last one that we did. And of course, the first 3 rules of learning, I'm told, are repetition, repetition, and repetition. So we might actually learn something by the time we're through here. Or I might. Never can tell. The people of God in the Old Testament, the Israelite nation, was spoken of in Exodus chapter 19 and verse 6 as a holy nation. If I can find it in this new Bible of mine. I'm still getting used to this new Bible, so y'all pardon me. "And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the sons of Israel." Now the word holy means what? What's another word for holy? Okay. He said in the purest sense it's separation. What's a word that we commonly say in religious circles, I shall say? No? Sanctified, okay. That was the word, okay. And certain religions have taken the word, that word, and the word has been also, I can't remember the word, the term I'm thinking of, but it's a form of that word is saints. And they have taken the word saints or sanctified ones, which is what saints means, and have turned it into a special class of Christians. But in fact, when we read the letters to the churches, they're written to the saints. And that's all Christians, or sanctified ones. Now the word in its purest form simply means the separated ones that have been pulled away from everyone else. Now, whether when God calls the nation of Israel the separated ones or the sanctified ones, whether that is the meaning of the word at that time, I'm not sure. He says that it was, or indicates at least, that it probably was. I don't know. Brother Turner knew a lot more Greek and Hebrew than I probably ever will. So we can ask Wayne about that if you're curious. He knows a lot more about that than I do. So, but nonetheless, the term did come to mean as on a higher plane, as of being separated from the earthly people and drawn closer to the spiritual level or godly level, at least at some point in time. And I really think that this is the meaning that's given in Exodus, just from the terminology that's given here. But when we look at the key of this lesson, for now we must give careful attention to how the Israelites, this is the second paragraph, page 5, came to occupy such a favored physical position and why such a choosing was made. We cannot properly appraise later connotations for the people of God without this historic background. This is the thrust of this lesson. How did Israel come to this situation? And let's just turn in our books and look at question number 3. Why were the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and then Jacob called holy and the people of God? Why? Anybody have an answer? I hope you looked at your lesson before you came in. That's why you have books. Okay. If we look at Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 20, I'll tell you what, let me just call these out. Someone turn to Deuteronomy 4 and verse 20. Then someone turn to Exodus chapter 19. Be ready to read verses 5 and 6. And then Psalm 135, verses 2 through 4. Who's got Deuteronomy 4 and verse 20? Okay, now this was spoken after the Exodus from Egypt. And he calls this the iron furnace. Why would God refer to Egypt, excuse me? Did I say the land of Exodus? I don't know. Why would God refer to Egypt as the iron furnace? Don? Okay. Okay. All right. We'll talk about that refinement process in a few minutes. You hit on something there. Exodus 19 verses 5 and 6. Okay. And then Psalm 135 verses 2 through 4. All right. So here we have and we could, of course, pull in probably 100 passages that help to explain this to us, but these three I think are sufficient that God had chosen these people because of His promise to Abraham, because He always keeps His word, and because this was in His plan to bring man back, as it were, to the Garden of Eden. Okay, now, do I want to? No, I'm going to save the explanation of that till the end of this series of lessons. But just suffice it to say that man was cast out of the Garden of Eden in the beginning, and God's plan was always to bring him back to a Garden of Eden. And let's just leave it at that right now. I think some of you understand what I'm talking about. And so God had to choose certain people, and we talked about this in the last lesson. He started out, He chose Seth, the third son of Adam and Eve, to be the one through whom this lineage would occur. He then chose Enoch, who walked with God. He chose Enoch to be translated so that he did not taste death because of his righteous character upon the earth. He chose Noah to survive the flood and to help bring his nation into existence. Then he chose Abraham, and then Isaac and Jacob, and the nation of Israel. And right on down, and we talked about how that he chose the unloved wife, Leah, over Rachel, to be the one through whom the Lion of the tribe of Judah would come, or the Lion of Israel, rather. Judah, no, wait a minute. Is Judah called the Lion somewhere? David is called the Lion of the tribe of Judah, but okay. I believe that's right. Judah is as a lion. That's right. In Jacob's prophecy of what was going to happen. Yes. And so Judah was chosen, who was a son of Leah. And again, who was the one that was buried in the cave of Machpelah, and who was buried out in the middle of the desert somewhere? Which wife? Leah was buried in the cave of Machpelah. Rebekah was buried out in the middle of a desert under a palm tree less than a day's journey away from Machpelah. Interesting. Yes? Rachel. Okay. Rachel was buried in the middle of the desert. I know who I want to say, I just can't get the names right. Thank you for keeping me straight. So, and then Judah was chosen then, and then David was chosen. And right on down. And then there were two non-Israelite ladies that were chosen. And we'll throw into this mix right now. Who were they? Rahab the harlot, Canaanite, my wife, Ruth, the Moabitess. God had pronounced a curse on Moab. Moab was an illegitimate son of Noah. But God chose Ruth. He chose Rahab, then He chose Ruth to bring the Messiah into the world. And then He chose the adulteress Bathsheba, who might have been a Hittite. I don't know. She was the wife of a Hittite. We know that. But she was an adulteress, and He chose her. Interesting how God's plan works. Not quite the way we would have done it. But let's recount this whole thing. We talked about specific people. But Abraham, of course, was called out of Ur of the Chaldees, and God told him that He would make of him a great nation. And we might say, as he said, he was kind of the breed stock, which is a cattleman's expression. He says a Texas expression. We use that in Florida in the cattle business. And it meant that he was the one through whom the whole people were going to come. And the promises made to Abraham, there was a threefold promise, but there are actually two parts to the promise. What were the two parts of the promise? Well, okay. And then what else? All right. So actually there were two parts to the promise. There was a land promise. The seed promise was actually a dual fulfillment thing, because there were seeds as of many. Then there was the seed as of one, through whom all nations would be blessed. And so there was a physical promise and a spiritual promise, wasn't there? We have the physical promise, of course, being the land and the nation of Israel. But the seed promise in Jesus Christ, the Messiah, through whom all nations would be blessed, was a spiritual promise that was made to Abraham. So you could say it two different ways, actually. Now, Israel was sent into the land of Canaan, but God told Abraham that I'm going to destroy the Canaanites and I'm going to give you their land, but not right now. Why? He gave a reason. Come on, y'all know this. Because the iniquity of the Canaanites is not yet full. That's not in our book, by the way. Going outside the book. Outside the box here. The iniquity of the Canaanites is not yet full. Now, up to this point in time, we see God choosing people even before they were born, and we talked about this in the last lesson. He predestined them, as it were, without them doing anything good or anything evil, because they had not yet been born. But He told Abraham that I'm giving you the land of the Canaanites, I'm going to destroy them, but He would not do it until their iniquity had come to a point where in His justice, He had to do it. Does that sound like God chooses people without respect to what they do? Not really, does it? Even though He already knew what was going to happen, He still had to wait for the things he knew was going to happen, for them to make their bad choices. And it was because of their bad choices that he chose to destroy the Canaanites and bring his nation Israel in, but he had to wait until it was time to do it, until they had made their enough bad choices that they were just unredeemable. He knows the nature of people. Yeah. So he brings Israel by famine out of the land of Canaan. And why would he take them out of the land of Canaan if he was going to give it to them? Anybody? Come on, y'all know this. Why did he have to get them out of the land of Canaan if that's where he wanted them to be? Well, he was going to destroy the Canaanites, but he was going to use Israel to destroy the Canaanites. But what would have likely happened to Israel if they had stayed in the land of Canaan while their nation was being built? Huh? There you go. I mean, yeah. What happened later when they did move into Canaan and didn't do what God told them to the Canaanites gives us the understanding of why God didn't leave them there. And so he brings them down to Egypt. Now in Egypt, things were really, I mean, looking at it from a human perspective, they worshipped every god under the sun. And, you know, I think they had a sun god. I think was Isis the sun god? I can't remember. But they had a host of gods, and they believed that their king Pharaoh was a god. And, you know, why would God take them down to Egypt? Which was just as bad as the Canaanite lands. What purpose would there be in that? Well, he got them down there, and then what did he do? He separated them up into the land of Goshen, which wasn't fit for cattle to graze, but it was perfect for sheep. Israel were shepherds, and shepherds were an abomination to the Egyptians, so that put them off by themselves. Under Pharaoh's protection, but without that evil influence being upon them, so that they could then build into a nation and maintain their faith in God and teach their children without conflict happening. Now God wants to get them out of Egypt, and he just told them, just like he did Abraham, right? Now get up out of the place that you're at and go to the land that I'm going to show you. Is that the way it happened? Not quite. Do you think if God had said that to Israel that they would have wanted to leave? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't know how many years they were enslaved. There might have been more than one Pharaoh that had them enslaved too. We don't know. There was a Pharaoh that arose that knew not Joseph and enslaved them, and it may have gone down to his son and grandson by the time God decided it was time to get them out. Go ahead. Okay. That's true. There's one other thing that being enslaved did for the nation of Israel. Do you know what that is? Do you know where I'm headed with that question? Somebody besides Don. What else did that enslavement do for the children of Israel? The hardship. What does hardship do for us? What? It unites us, doesn't it? When we're under persecution, we tend to draw together with those who are of like mind, don't we? And we tend to get closer together, and we form a bond. And frankly, that bond that was formed among the Israelite nation then has continued largely to this day. Because most of those who are of Jewish descent are very proud of that. And so it formed a bond between them. Now, we'll talk about how that bond's not important in another lesson down the road here. But now God says it's time for you to leave. And so He sends Moses to them. And of course they had the 10 plagues and so on and so forth. And Pharaoh says, no, you're not leaving. And then all of a sudden he says, get out. I'm going to drive you out. I can't stand you anymore. You're going to kill us all. And so then after they leave, Pharaoh says, why did I do that? I want them back. So he goes after them with all of his army. Again, Israel is terrified. You know, Moses, what have you done bringing us out here in the wilderness? Pharaoh's going to kill us now. Moses said, just stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Oftentimes I think that needs to be the advice we give ourselves. Stand still, see the salvation of the Lord when we're in trouble. Moses stretched out his rod over the Red Sea, and all night long an strong east wind blew, it says. And the next morning they woke up, the waters were split asunder. And somebody says, well, the water was probably only ankle deep. Yeah, I'll give you that if ankle deep water is deep enough to drown a man riding a horse. You know? Yeah. And they had mounted horsemen. They had a cavalry. So it had to be deep enough to drown a man riding a horse. Now, how deep was it? That's all I can say. But it was that deep at least. And God saved them. And He showed His great power to them in that day. And that generation, it appears, remembered that. It was subsequent generations that had problems. So God promises them then certain lands. In Genesis chapter 15, let's read verses 18 through 21, where God made this promise to Abraham of the lands that He was going to give to his seed in time to come. Whoever's there, go ahead and read it. Okay? All of these lands I'm going to give you. Now basically what that promise was, when you look at where those people were gathered at that time, that was from the river of Egypt was a little stream that only had water in it sometimes during the year, but that was about the southern border of the nation of Israel. When we look at the map later on, all the way up to the tribe of Dan in the north, the northern tribe of Dan, because Dan split in two, after the land was inhabited, and then all the way over to the river Euphrates. Now, beyond that fertile valley there near the Jordan, what was between there and the river Euphrates was desert. And nobody really lived there much. But there were kings that had control over that land. And we're going to look in just a minute in Joshua chapter 21. Let's read verses 43 through 45. Okay? Then let's look at 1 Kings chapter 4, just to solidify this, because there are people that say, oh, the land promise was never fulfilled. That's yet to be fulfilled. But look at 1 Kings 4, and let's read 21. All right. So this specifies all the way from where the Philistines lived. And where did the Philistines live? Right on the border of the Mediterranean. They were a seashore tribe of people. I call them tribe, as different from the 12 tribes of Israel. But they were a seashore people. All the way from the Mediterranean, all the way to the river Euphrates. Solomon controlled all of that area. It specifies that was the area God promised to Abraham that he was going to give to his descendants. So here we have it specified that all of this land was indeed given, and Solomon took tribute from the people who lived there. It even says he took tribute from them. So how much more certain can you be that Solomon was in control of it? You know, just because he said, this is mine, but, well, I don't have the power to do anything with it, that doesn't really mean it was his. You know, you can claim, I can claim that I don't know whose car that is, but the car I'm looking at out there outside the door, that white sort of SUV looking car, that's my car. I claim that car. But do I have the key to it? I don't think so. I think Ruth is over that way. I don't have the key to it. I can't drive it. I can't do anything with it. But it says Solomon took tribute from the peoples that lived in all of these regions. That specifies that yes, he did have control of it. So if anybody comes to you and tries to tell you that the land promise was never fulfilled, here are a couple of passages to go to nail it down tight. Yes, it was done. Let's look at question number 2. When they went into the land, they were told, do not marry with the inhabitants of Canaan. Why were they told that? Okay, turn to Deuteronomy chapter 7. Let's read verses 1 through 4. Okay. Wait a minute. I was looking for the next verse. Deuteronomy 7, actually 1 through 4. Just make a quick comment here. This is something that every time you bring it up in a Bible class, there's a lot of controversy. Is it a sin to marry a non-Christian? I'm just going to say, I'm not going to go there, because that's not the important thing. So the one who is unmarried and who is thinking about getting married, now to one who's already in that situation, God has given specific instructions to the Corinthian church, and we need to follow those. But to one who is not yet in that situation, you need to understand that it's about the dumbest thing you can do. To yoke yourselves to someone who doesn't have the same belief that you do. It is not wise. God told Israel, don't you do it, because they'll turn your heart away from God. It's a whole lot easier, as one preacher did. He had a woman that he was counseling, and she was wanting to marry a non-Christian. He says, get up on my desk. And she got up on the desk, and he says, now pull me up. Take me by the hand and pull me up. Well, she couldn't do it. He gave one yank, and down she came on the floor. He says, it's a whole lot easier for him to pull you down than for you to pull him up. And you need to understand that. I don't know if she got the message or not from that. I don't know if she got mad at him for pulling her off the desk. But that's the point. It's easier to go downhill than it is to go uphill. Why do you want to put yourself in a position where you're always having to drag the other one uphill? But God said, do not intermarry with them, because they will turn your heart away from me. Turn to Deuteronomy 17. Let's read verses 14 through 17. Whoever's there. When Solomon became king, what was the first violation of this statement here that he did? No. Read the passage of Scripture. That's the order that Solomon violated every command that's given here. The first thing he did, he went back to Egypt to multiply horses to himself and chariots to himself. The second thing he did was he turned around here and he caused the people to go back down there again. Then he multiplied wives unto himself. And then the next thing he did was he made gold so common in the land of Israel that silver was like the stones on the ground. Right down the line in that order. And maybe wisdom means you don't necessarily read God's Word like you should. I don't know. Saying that he was the wisest man in all the earth, I think that probably refers to his early days, when he was still tender of heart. And then maybe, if you believe that he wrote Ecclesiastes and Proverbs and so forth, and the Song of Solomon in his later years, perhaps he got wise in his later years. because he came back to the Lord. I believe that that's what happened. That he wrote those in the later part of his life. Any other comments? Did you have something, Keith? Okay, I thought you looked like you had something to say. Let's answer question number 1. Well, let's see. We've already answered, actually, question number 1. So let's... Now, the fact is that when we look at Deuteronomy chapter 10 and verse 17, and then at Acts chapter 10 and verse 34, they basically say the same thing. God chose the nation of Israel not because of themselves, not because they were mightier than any other nation, as Moses told them, but because God loved them before they had done anything to deserve being chosen as God's people. He chose them. But was their continuing to remain the chosen people of God an unconditional thing? No, it wasn't. Because God is no respecter of persons, but in every nation he that feareth him and worketh righteousness is acceptable to him. He told them that, and he told them that, and he told them that. If you want to remain my chosen people, you got to do what? Yeah, follow his commandments, be obedient. Did they do that? Not even close. Now, fairly said, in all fairness, we need to understand, because when I was younger, I tended to look at this and go, why didn't those idiots get it? Well, I'll tell you why they didn't get it. The generations that got it stayed faithful to God. It says, after Joshua led them into the land, and they began to conquer the land, all of the generation that had grown up with Joshua and knew Joshua and the wise men that worked with Joshua stayed faithful to God, but the next generation did not know what had happened. And so here's a father and his son that are going down in the valley to the Jordan River, and they got to cross up over the other side. Now in that valley, the sun comes up very late in the morning and it goes down very early in the afternoon. So if you want to get in and out of that valley before dark, you've got to start practically at daylight and get in there and keep moving until you get out of there. And so here they come down to the Jordan River, and here's this pile of 12 stones up there, and the son goes, Dad, what's that pile of stones? And Dad says, well, son, we got to get up out of this valley before it gets dark, because there's robbers and there's lions and there's all kinds of nasty things in here after dark. I'll tell you about it later. And so they keep heading up out of the valley, and then Dad forgets to tell the son what that pile of stones was all about. How that God stopped up the waters of the Jordan River so that they could cross on dry land and put terror into the hearts of the inhabitants of Canaan. And that's why the generation that grew up with Joshua remembered the things that happened, but the generation that came after was not taught. And so when we're looking at this cycle that Israel kept going through, we have to realize that that's not the same generation we're talking about. That's down the road. So we have to keep teaching. Go ahead, Don. Yeah. That's right. It is. And as parents, I have to say I haven't done as good as I should with my children. I just have to admit it. I haven't. Over the years. I can't unring that bell. But I wish I had done a little better, especially with my daughters. I spent a lot of time with my sons out scouting in the woods and talking to them and all, but I didn't do as much with my daughters as I should have. And I wish I had. When they were real little, if I'd established a better relationship with them, I don't know. Of course, Jenna turned out fine. Tell you what, let's, it's about time for that second bell, isn't it? Couple minutes? All right. Well, let me go through one more thing then that maybe we'll get through this next point, the next paragraph here. The original promise that God made to Abraham, He said, I will bless you, I will make your name great, you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse him who curses you, and in all the families of the earth shall be blessed. And then the promise is repeated again in Genesis chapter 22. And Paul makes the point here in Galatians chapter 3 and verse 16 that he did not say to seeds as of many. Problem with that, as I understand it, is that in the Hebrew and Greek texts of the New Testament day, the word seed was seeds. It was plural. Paul makes a point that it was singular. So Paul kind of missed it here in Galatians 3:16. Paul kind of missed it there because he said to seed as of one. But was Paul wrong? Not at all. He was inspired by the Holy Spirit. So he was definitely right. It's up to us to figure out what did he mean. Well, what he meant was it was a dual fulfillment of the promise, wasn't it? Prophecies can have dual fulfillments. Many of them do. There was a prophecy that he would make his seed as numerous as the sand in the seashore. Well, you know what? That's said about Israel. That they were as numerous as the sand by the seashore. But you know what else? That promise was also fulfilled in the one seed, Jesus Christ. Because He made it possible for all of the nations to come in to the house of God and be the people of God. Didn't He? Now, before I close, and the second bell has rung, and I'll leave it right here for Dennis to pick up. We didn't get through the lesson today. You may not really understand where all of this is headed right now. I'm going to give you the same little pep talk that Farrell Jenkins gave to all of his classes on scheme of redemption at Florida College a couple of years ago when I was there. You may not understand this right now, but bear with the class and you will understand. Toward the end of the class, it'll all begin to really come together for you if you don't see it now. And you'll understand where we're headed with all of this. And the foundation that we're laying right now is the foundation for how we're going to look at what and who are the people of God today. And how are they to act. And just what are the parameters of this idea. So thank you for your attention. And again, we have the entertainment coming in.